Hello everyone, and welcome to this recording of a webinar session that I've been delivering this week commencing the 10th of May in recognition of Mental Health Awareness Week for 2021, which also happens to be Learning at Work Week. So my name is James and I am the founder of Arrow HR, and I'm going to be taking us through the content of the session that I shared quite extensively during the week with quite a wide audience from a diverse number of organisations and sectors. So the subject of this recording is just to share some thoughts, insights and discussion points and thought provokers around self-care and self-awareness, particularly during these ongoing difficult times. So for those of you that may not have experienced the actual webinar or accessing this recording for the first time, my name's James Maher, and there you can see in the top left, that's what I look like, or it's what I looked like before I grew a beard anyway. I am a registered instructor, acknowledged by Mental Health First Aid England, and I deliver the full suite of adult and youth courses that are provided by MHFA England. I am also a trainer for the charity Mind, and I'm also a member of the Royal Society for Public Health. I've got about 10 years background in the arena of mental health awareness and literacy, particularly in the workplace, which is where my main focus is. But my professional background is actually in human resources, or HR, and I've worked for 30 years within the HR space. And it was certainly my professional background and my HR calling that initially made me curious and wanting to find out more about the subject of mental health and mental health awareness. But again, driven by professional curiosity, but also some personal lived experience in that as well. So that's enough about me, because the session is not for me to talk about me, but to share some thoughts and insights. So I'm going to spend the next 25 minutes or so just sharing with you some content and some thoughts around what does self-care actually mean, and considerations around looking after ourselves within these challenging and ongoing difficult times. Before we actually go into those thoughts and insights, it's important to acknowledge what current reality is for many of us out there. So if there's one word that binds all of us together as we continue to navigate our way through the COVID-19 pandemic, it's the word uncertainty. There are high levels of uncertainty all around us about what the future holds. We just don't know. We've got used to not knowing potentially what's going to happen next, but that doesn't make it feel any more comfortable. In fact, it feels a lot more unsettling, whether it's professionally, personally, on work grounds or health grounds, whether it's our own welfare or the welfare of others. There's a high degree of uncertainty, and nothing feels like it's going to change for quite some time. And whilst the United Kingdom begins to cautiously open up, which is fantastic, we're not too sure where the path is going to lead us, and we're also casting an eye beyond the United Kingdom, and we can see there's still many parts of the world that are struggling massively with the pandemic. So uncertainty still abounds, and uncertainty still prevails all around us. Within that level of uncertainty, we tend to find we're not too good at giving ourselves permission to recognise how we're feeling in ourselves, usually because we're so busy. We're actually spending a lot of time fulfilling the requirements, needs, demands, expectations of those around us, whether that's professionally or personally. We all tend to be very caring people, so inevitably we do tend to put others before us, and sometimes that leaves us wanting or at the back of the queue when considering, how am I really feeling, what's happening to me, and how's it making me feel. And with so much noise in our lives at the moment, so much uncertainty in our lives, we're being bombarded with all sorts of messaging. So being able to focus on what we can control is hard. It's really difficult, particularly when so much is happening around us. And sometimes it's difficult to step back just to ask ourselves, what are we considering? What are we worrying about? What are we thinking about? When ultimately we could be spending an awful lot of time, effort and energy concentrating and focusing our emotional and physical energies into aspects of life we have absolutely no control over. So we'll spend a little bit of time considering, so what can I control? And importantly, critically, we need to recognise that everybody's situation is unique and personal to them. We're not going to be talking about a blanket approach within this recording. We're very much going to be just considering elements that may work for some, less so for others. The only request I have of everybody listening or watching this recording is, please just give it a little bit of time, give it some due consideration, and if you go away and consider or try something as a result of this recording, then that's great. Can't really ask for more. But it is important we acknowledge we're all unique, we are all individual, and how we are interpreting events as they happen around us are ours and no one else's. And it is important we do recognise the need to find ways to help ourselves. So, as a start point, you're moving into considerations and self-helps. The first one I'm going to mention is talking and sharing. I know we hear about it an awful lot. I know we probably see an awful lot on social media or other communication channels that we intake around the need to talk and share and to listen. It's hard, it's not easy. I'll be the first to acknowledge that. We've been living in a reality for the last 15 months where we have to be as disconnected and isolated from people as we possibly can. We are living in an age of disconnection, interpersonal disconnection, one-on-one disconnection. But the space has been filled by technology. For some of us, that's a great thing. It's a great enabler. For others, not so. And, we feel intimidated by technology. And the long and the short of it is, when we don't have somebody we feel we can share or talk to, whether that's through technological devices, whether that's face-to-face with all the restrictions that we need to recognise, or whether that's just a good old-fashioned phone call, if we don't have someone, or if we don't feel we have anyone around us that can be that genuine, authentic listener, the likelihood is we tend to keep things to ourselves. And as we keep things to ourselves, we just fill up with it. And at some point in time, we're going to overflow. At some point in time, our capacity to hold things in will breach, will break. And usually when that happens, we tend to react and behave in ways that we wouldn't normally consider becoming of ourselves. And it's not healthy and it's not helpful. So holding things in and bugging things up really does fuel poor health. So it is an important and critical consideration. Who do I have around me? Who do I have who I can talk with, who I can share? Someone that's genuine, someone that's prepared to listen. And of course, talking and sharing works both ways. It's not just a one-way experience. So I'll leave it there because it's a very personal consideration, and I'll potentially ask some personal questions with regards to who those people are. I will move us on now and move us into a subject that can be very Marmite. It can be very take it or leave it. It can be very like or dislike. And I just want to spend a couple of minutes talking about social media and the news. Social media in this age of disconnection is actually a very good enabler for many, many millions of people. So it's important that nobody thinks that I'm here to try and knock social media in some way. I'm not. However, it's also important to acknowledge that when we tend to take a window on the world from social media, whether that's platforms such as Facebook or Instagram or Twitter, or professional platforms like LinkedIn, it's important that we try not to judge ourselves based on how we perceive how other people are doing. And yet social media is very much a fuel and an energy for that sense of self-judgment. Whether it is a professional platform, whether it is on a friendship or social platform, judging ourselves based on how we think other people or other organizations are doing, whether they're thriving, whether they're surviving, whether they're just doing the best they can, is unfair on ourselves. And it is important that if we are going to judge ourselves, we base our judgment on how we think we are doing, not how we think someone else is doing and what that means to us. Being very honest and genuine with everyone listening to this recording, you never know what you're reading on social media to be true or not. And the pandemic has created a raft of keyboard warriors. And it's also a great blank canvas to create an illusions and misinformation. So social media is a great enabler. It fuels technological connectivity, particularly over time and distance. But it's important we don't judge ourselves based on the perceptions that it can deliver from time to time. Equally, when we're talking about the news, it's important to remember that the majority of what we experience on the news is speculative. And if we were to live our lives being driven by constant speculation over 24 hours, we would quite literally tie ourselves up in knots. Yet over the last 15 months or so, many millions of us have started to engage with the news in a different way. We started to engage in news in a way of absolutely informing us about what's happening in the world around us. It's important to stay connected. It's important to understand what's happening. But equally, becoming obsessed by the news, becoming immersed in the news can be very unhealthy. In the last 12 months, delivering online mental health first aid, they were the biggest conversations that come up about stressors and pressure, social media and the news. And yet they're both aspects of life that we can directly control. We control the amount of time we spend on social media platforms. We can also control how much news we intake, whether that's on the TV, whether it's online, or whether it's good old-fashioned newspapers. So when we're thinking about aspects that we have control at our fingertips, certainly consider these two if they are something that you engage in on a very high level. Okay, next, I've just referenced physical health is looking after your body. So again, I see it an awful lot in digital content, in printed media and in televisual media, the importance of physical activity, exercising. And yet, I can't disagree with that, it is. And all of us, to some degree, have had our ability to engage in physical activity impaired in some way. Reality is gyms have been closed more often than not over the last year or so, and being able to get out there to run, to move, at times has been limited. But physical health is not just about exercise and activity. It's about movement, it's about nutrition, it's about hydration, and it's also about how we rest and recover. And millions of us over the last year have had to adapt and transform the way we live, and the way we maintain our physical health has been transformed, particularly those millions that have had to adjust to life working in the place that they live. Because fundamentally, for those of us that used to be very active and maybe traveled a lot, certainly myself being a full-time trainer, I used to travel a lot and stand on my feet a lot. My idea of movement now is to move from one room to another, sit down in front of a webcam for 12, 14 or 16 hours a day. And my eating patterns that were once structured around breaks and schedules, I can pretty much eat whenever I feel like it now because my kitchen is next to me. I can drink what I like when I like. And as far as rest patterns go, it's easy for me to give myself permission to stay up late or longer, particularly as I may say to myself, I don't need to do the drive. I don't need to be online until 10 o'clock. And as a result of all that, it's not helpful overall. It's not helpful to our physical well-being, and it's not helpful to our emotional or mental well-being. So as far as looking forward to transitioning back to the workplace, which seems to be quite a buzz phrase at the moment, we're starting to look forwards, we're starting to gradually, tentatively move back into professional and social realities that we've not known for some time. Maybe now is a good time to start considering or thinking about what were the routines I needed to engage in before, whether that was setting the alarm, whether that was preparing for the next day, the evening before. But once we can start connecting with those small routines, those small little disciplines, it will help our overall transition, and it will help us get back slowly but gradually into everyday aspects of maintaining our overall physical well-being, not just through activity, but through our nutrition, our hydration, and most importantly of all, our rest and recovery. So my next 2 points is centered around supports that you may and do have access to. So the first point I'm going to mention is any internal care supports you have access to through your employment. It's absolutely critical that you are curious about them. Don't be afraid to ask questions. What do you have in place? Do you have an employee assistance program or something similar, some kind of well-being function? And if you do have these supports in place, be curious about them, use them, ask questions, consider how they may be to help you. The thing about internal care pathways and internal professional supports is that they are an employment benefit. They're not there just to, I don't know, fill a space, to be a little sheet or poster or flyer, pins to a notice board. They're actually fundamental to overall health and well-being. And if you have them in place, they are professional services that are fully confidential and can be accessed immediately, free of charge. As I say, an employment benefit. So absolutely be curious, understand what's available to you within your employer's organization. Check out what there is and ask yourself the question, would any of this work for me? Would it be helpful for me to pick up the phone and talk to somebody? And as far as confidentiality goes, please be reassured that any kind of supports that are in place in an organisation are all fully confidential. There's no such thing as a report that goes onto a manager's desk after engaging with these supports. It's a myth and it's just not true. However, that said, many of us may not have access to internal care pathways or organisational supports. And equally, many of us may elect not to engage with internal care pathways or professional supports. Many of us choose not to engage with internal supports for a whole raft of reasons, and that's okay. We all have a choice in everything, and our choice should always be respected. So on the back of that, as part of this recording and as part of the onward information pack that's been left with your organisation, I've provided direct links to a number of resources that are out there, are in circulation. But I do understand that trying to understand, so what's out there, how might it help me, how might it work for me or someone close to me, can be quite daunting. So what I've done is I've pulled together a handful of absolute critical key supports that are being driven by organisations who have the span, have the knowledge, have the credibility, and have the kite mark, for want of a better term. So any of these resources that you see here on the screen and that have been sent to you onward, be reassured that these are organisations and resources that are recognised nationally and internationally and as being of a kite mark standard for the subject of awareness and support. You'll see national organisations in there like Mind and MHFA England. Also put some resources in there that are very centric and focus on the workplace. So organisations such as Mental Health at Work, the Mental Health Foundation, who sponsor Mental Health Awareness Week, and also the City Mental Health Alliance. I've also popped in there some details for an organisation called Young Minds, because one of the common themes that continually pops up in certainly training courses I deliver is the subject of young people and the genuine concern that many have about the young people in their lives, whether that's a personal relationship or a professional relationship with a young person. So when you receive your handout, all of the links that you see here will be live. You don't need to Google anything. You can just click onto this link and check out what you find. Again, it's a choice thing. It's a personal preference thing. I'm not submitting these resources as a one-size-fits-all, far from it. And it may be that you take a look at some of these resources and you decide they're not for you, and that's okay too. At least you've taken a look and you've made a balanced and conscious judgment and decision based on what you've experienced, and that's absolutely fine. Finally, the final thought I'd like to share just before we go into a final little toolkit. It's just the concept of trying to avoid putting pressure on ourselves. Easier said than done, I know, and I understand that. But it's important that we do acknowledge that we're not responsible for what's happening in the world, and we're not responsible for trying to fix everything that's gone wrong as a result. Trying to make everyone happy is a shortcut to ill health, both physically, emotionally. It's a shortcut to crisis, it's a shortcut to burnout and exhaustion. Think about you. Think about the things that you can control, not ruminate on the things you have no impact on. We cannot control the pathway of the virus. We have absolutely no say or influence in whatever decisions the government makes that may impact on the way we live our lives day to day. What we can do is step back, consider ourselves, and make time for ourselves, make time to recharge those batteries. Because straddling that fine line between strain and illness is very, very difficult. It's challenging, it's draining, it's exhausting. And the last thing we want to be is poorly ourselves. And then finally, just to share with you a link to something called the 5 Ways to Wellbeing. Now, the 5 Ways to Wellbeing was created around about 15 years ago by an organisation called the New Economic Foundation. The 5 Ways have taken quite a high degree of prominence over the last 12 months through the lens of the pandemic and through the lens of self-care. Now, the 5 Ways to Wellbeing are not some sort of checklist or some sort of compliance list whereby if I do everything that's referenced here, it will transform how I live my life. Far from it. They're points of consideration, and the foundation points are all of them centre around considering ourselves. So I've already referenced elements of the content. In the link you can see below in the graphic is a link to the national website for the charity Mind, who are key sponsors of the 5 Ways to Wellbeing. But what I do just want to do is just share some alternative narrative around what you can see in front of you on the screen. So the aspect of connect, we've spoken about talking and listening and sharing, feeling connected to someone else. Don't forget about feeling connected to something, a purpose, a professional purpose, a purpose that gives us enjoyment, maybe a hobby, a pastime, connection to something that enables us to learn. And when we talk about learning, learning is a very formal experience in the workplace learning side of life. It's very structured, there are numerous protocols, there are numerous elements of quality control and checking and so forth, which is absolutely right. But learning can be very informal as well. We can learn through experience, exposure, and opportunities we have. We can learn through participating in things that we enjoy. We can learn from listening to other people. So it's never too late to start learning, to be open to learning, or considering how we learn. Being active, we've already touched on, but if we enjoy what we do, it can help to move our mood in the right direction. Taking notice is always interesting. We're very good at being able to take notice and consider what's important to us in the past. We're very good at considering what was important to us reflectively. But we're normally so busy and so caught up and snarled up in the here and now. It takes quite a lot of fortitude to sometimes step back and ask ourselves the question, what's important to me now? None of us wants to reflect and be regretful about anything that's happened. But equally, there's nothing stopping us. There's no one not giving us permission to step back and think, what's important to me now? And what's important to me now? What are the things that bring me enjoyment? What are the things that bring me pleasure? What are the things that give me hope and make me happy? And spend some time focusing on those, connecting with them and enjoying them. And finally, give. Give is sometimes referenced as being altruistic. And as it says on the graphic, giving isn't just about donating. It can be giving your time, your words, your knowledge, your experience, your wisdom, or quite simply your presence. And for those of us that can connect with the aspect of giving, it's never too late. wherever we are in life. And actually, the concept of giving and the enjoyment of giving can actually make us feel very good as human beings. So, my final thought and question to anyone who's hearing this for the first time centers around the term self-care, or sometimes being kind to yourself, which is something that we've heard an awful lot over the last 12 months. When a term becomes quite popular language in society, there's always someone out there that wants to challenge it, someone out there that wants to maybe change the meaning of something into something that's meant to be and designed to be positive and helpful to something less helpful. So, for example, self-care, some folks interpret as being a little bit selfish or a little bit self-centered, which is unfair and unhelpful. You all, those of you out there who are listening to this recording, you all work in sectors, you're in roles that demand that you provide help and support. Right? It's what we do. It's what we enjoy doing. And when we're providing help and support to others, we actually show due courtesy and respect to those that we're supporting, to those that we're encouraging, to those that we're listening to, that we're nurturing. And yet, there's often a disconnect between self-care and self-respect. So just think about practicing a bit of self-care, practicing a bit of you time for you, not as selfish, not as self-centered, but as showing yourself a bit of courtesy and self-respect. And the one question I'll just leave there to float for you to consider or to ponder. I'm sure that because you've got to this point in the recording and you're still here with me, you are by nature people who are generally and genuinely very supportive to those around you, and that putting those around you first and foremost is instinctive. And if I were to ask you the question, so tell me about the last time you had a supportive conversation with somebody, you would be able to tell me a lot of detail. You would be able to provide me with an awful lot of insights around a supportive conversation that you led and the benefits to the person that you were trying to support. So my question, my final thought is, if you were you having a supportive conversation with yourself, what would that look like? What would it sound like? And then what would it feel like? Just as you can articulate what a supportive conversation looks, sounds, and feels like when you are having it with someone else, what does it look, sound, and feel like when you're having it with yourself? Okay, that's it. So thank you for staying with me up until this point in time. It's been a pleasure having your company for the last 25 minutes or so. I'm genuinely grateful beyond measure that you've taken the time out to spend listening to this recording. It means an awful lot to me, and I know it will mean an awful lot to your colleagues and peers who've also attended the live session too. So from me, thank you very much. If you do have any questions that you'd like to ask me, you can do that by way of contacting me direct via my email or through the website address below. Or alternatively, just contact your organizer within your place of employment, who I'm in regular contact with regardless. So thank you very much. Whatever time of day or night it is that you're listening to this, have a great day, have a great evening, take care of yourself. I wish you all the best, and thank you.